Welcome back to the show. You have found Wooden Sticks. We are recording, as always, from the Aquarius Home Services studio. And looking forward to reconnecting with a dear friend of mine in the broadcast business. He's a legendary hockey guy. Eddie Olczyk played 16 seasons, played over 1,000 games, played for 6 different teams. He's in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. He's got his name on that Stanley Cup, a part of that 1994 Cup-winning team with the New York Rangers. Yeah, that team, the Mark Messier, we will win in Game 6 in the Eastern Conference Final. Just a spectacular run after being drafted 3rd overall by his hometown Chicago Blackhawks. And, you know, I build these placards when I record these podcasts every week. And when I got ready for Eddie here today, I ran out of room for one thing with all the different bullet points, because this guy has been a player. He's been a coach. He's worked for the Seattle Kraken. He's worked for national broadcasting like TNT, which he'll be doing this week out in Colorado. He's worked for NBC covering national horse racing, including the Breeders' Cup in a couple of weeks. He has worked with Doc Emrick, in my opinion, the all-time greatest play-by-play voice of NHL hockey, the Vin Scully, as it would be, of the National Hockey League. In fact, those two were together for EA Sports about a decade ago, involved in that great NHL 15 and beyond video game. He's a father of 4. He's a spectacular guy, loves playing the horses, loves broadcasting hockey. And it's just going to be a day today where I'm just going to smile the whole time. Any time I've spent with this guy over the years, I've left better for it. He's beaten cancer, so he's another guest on the show, like Tony Granato, that's used the toughness that he had that made him a great professional hockey player off the ice to kick cancer's ass. He's the author of a spectacular autobiography, Eddie Olczyk, Beating the Odds in Hockey and Life, which really touches on that journey. And really looking forward to just plugging into his great knowledge. He, for my money, and again, I'm probably biased because we are friends, but if I take the friendship out of the equation, for my money in the modern era, the best analyst in the game. And I mean that sincerely. And obviously, I'm not the only person that has this opinion. He's everywhere for a reason. And by the way, when you've got Doc Emrick, and at that time, Doc Emrick at the peak of his skills, this was the guy they paired up with Doc Emrick. That happens for a reason. He is extraordinarily talented. And I think today on the show, you'll get to really feel the passion that is Ed Olczyk for everything he loves in horses and hockey. Pucks and ponies, as he likes to say. So we're going to get to that briefly. We got to give a quick shout out to my main man, John Schweitz. Thank you to him and our friends from the Minnesota Masonic Cancer Center, along with the Masonic Children's Hospital and the Masonic Home in Bloomington. They do great work right here in Minnesota. They're the largest fraternal organization throughout the world, and they always answer the call when it's time for charitable needs. So John Schweitz and the Minnesota Masonic Charity here in the Twin Cities is just spectacular, and I want to thank them for being the title sponsor of our show. And I want to make you a part of the show too. Don't forget Andrew Height. The White Dog is the man, AHEYDT at talknorth.com. Get a hold of Andrew Height and put your business right here front and center at Talk North, as we have so many great shows that can elevate your business world. When we come back, speaking of great, nobody better, it's Eddie Olczyk here on Wooden Sticks. Welcome back to Wooden Sticks. We are recording today from the Aquarius Home Services studio. As I mentioned in the intro, a dear friend of mine in the broadcast business now, longtime NHLer, hockey legend, Eddie Olczyk. Enzo, great to connect with you.
Hey, what's up, Kev? Nice to be with you. And selfishly for us too, the next 3+ weeks is no better time in our lives. I know, at least away from our families, anyways. All due respect to both families, but you got pucks. And you got ponies. So we got the Breeders' Cup right around the corner in early November out at Del Mar. And I'll be working for NBC both days on Breeders' Cup weekend. And, of course, sandwiched around that is the National Hockey League season. So the ultimate daily double. And it's always great to catch up with you. And always good to talk to a familiar face and a great friend.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Breeders' Cup and what it provides. I want to know how you stay energetic and fresh because as I explained to Alex, our producer, before we started recording, you work a bunch of games for the Seattle Kraken, you do national
Mhm.
games for TNT all season long. You're traveling all over the country for those hockey games, and then you mix in horse racing on its biggest stage for the Breeders' Cup. What is your secret to honestly handling the travel? Because I've done it now for 20 years. It's not easy to stay fresh.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's any kind of a secret. I think just for all the years of doing it, I think you just you pick your spots on traveling as you get a little bit older. I think and I've had some, obviously, my health scare a bunch of years ago with my stage 3 colon cancer battle, and developing AFib after taking the vaccine, and I'm dealing with heart conditions now, and so I just try to make sure I'm getting my rest on my road, on the road, and taking flights that are advantageous for me, and those are the greatest challenges because 25 years ago is not the same. I don't feel the same. I don't have the same jump in energy, so I try to just really, allocate my schedule and see what's going on, and, not trying to do 3 hockey games in 3 nights anymore. Like I can't
Right.
do it. I'm not, it's not good for anybody. It's not good for the viewers. It's not good for the people I'm working with. And, I think longevity wise is, I did it for almost 14 years at NBC where, I would do 3 and 3 or 4 and 5, probably 6, 7 times a year. And when you multiply that by, 14, 15 years, it takes its toll on you. So I think for me, long-winded, it's the aspect of, just getting in a routine, making sure I'm getting my rest and sleeping in when I can, and catching up on work while I'm traveling. And I think that's probably where my greatest strength has been, is that I do a lot of my work and my prep when I am traveling. So when I'm at home, my focus is my wife, my kids, my grandkids, and then when I'm traveling, I get my rest, and then I get to work and do what I need to do when I'm on the airplane.
We're in the second week of the season. It's awfully early. Any impressions, Edzo, early on as you watch the season unfold? I was bullish on Dallas before the year
Hmm.
started. I think they're one of the favorites for a good reason.
Yes.
Nothing's changed my mind so far, but it's awfully early. What are your impressions of the season so far?
Yeah, I mean, I thought going in, Kev, that Dallas, Vegas. I know Colorado is, as we speak today, I'm actually in Colorado for Bruins and Avalanche on TNT, and they're 0-3, and they've given up a boatload of goals, and I don't think anybody thought they'd get off to the start that they have, but I don't think there's panic here, but that's a little bit surprising. You know, Edmonton finally got their first win. But I thought it was Vegas, Dallas, and then the 2 teams I just mentioned, and everybody else. Like Vancouver is a very good team, but I kind of feel that they will come back to the pack. I mentioned Edmonton. I think they'll come back to the pack with a lot of changes that had happened there. But I think it's wide open after that. But I agree with you. Dallas and Vegas, in my opinion, early seem to have separated themselves, if you could say that, in 3 or 4 games into the regular season, especially in the Western Conference. But as you know, all it takes is one injury, one trade, one firing, and all of a sudden a team,
Hmm.
goes on a run or goes the other way. And like, I'm a big believer that, and I learned this a long time ago, back 40 years ago when I was a rookie with the Chicago Blackhawks, is that, I don't think you can make the playoffs the first 20 games, Kev, but I think you can miss the playoffs the first 20 games. And I know what happened in St. Louis. What was that now, 4 or 5 years ago? I mean, I know, they were last place in December, and, they ended up
Yes.
winning the Stanley Cup, right? But like, that's my belief. And the one thing I love and I'm amused by is how everybody says when we get to, February and March, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how close it is," and all these teams, and I just, like, I take this. I've been saying this forever, and I'm like, why are you surprised? Like, we have 3-point games. There's so much parity in the National Hockey League. It's so hard to get separation. For me, look at, I'm old school. Like, I like to see 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, 3 versus
Yes.
14, and so on and so on, and whatever. And I get it. Look at, I understand. But to me, if we're never going to see that, and we know never is a long time, but if it's not in the offering, then I'm a believer is that if you win, you should get the full Monty. If you lose, you should go home and try to figure it out and try to get points in your next game. Like, if you really, and again, the regular season means something, but I think it would mean a whole lot more is if you got points and you win, you got the 2 points. If you didn't, you got nothing, and you're able to figure it out. And again, I think you would really get a truer sense of everything when it comes to divisional play, and also when it comes to conference and wild cards and what have you.
I'm with you. I cannot stand the shootout, and I understand and respect why we have the shootout.
Yes.
To me,
Yes.
it's a
Yeah.
gimmick, and I would much rather have 2 points for the winner, 0 for the loser, whether it's regulation and overtime. We can figure out if we want to play overtime 5-on-5, 4-on-4, or 3-on-3. That can be decided.
Yeah.
Do away with the bonus point, and please just do away with the shootout. I cannot stand how games actually matter. Those points actually matter for teams
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
in or not getting in on a total gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, look at, I get and we get it. I know what you're saying. I think, look at the league. I mean, I remember when I was coaching in Pittsburgh some 20 years ago, being able to be a part of Marc-Andre Fleury's. We share our first wins together in the National Hockey League. It was a comeback win against the Detroit Red Wings. And, like, I get why we did that. We wanted to get rid of the ties. I understand that. And I think for the first little while, it was very awesome, but it's the way that it is. Okay. We got it. And it's not changing in the very near future, but I do believe is that, if there was a different, how do I want to put this? If there was a different point, being able to figure out if you did get a 3 points for a win in regulation, you get a 2-point win for overtime, and maybe you give that other team a point, and maybe it's the same in a shootout, or just go 3-2 and then go 2-1 in a shootout if it gets to a shootout. Like I said, I think that there's some tweaking that if I was asked, and I'm not, but I think if we had a chance to put something in the suggestion box to the commissioner, is that, it'd be interesting to see. Now, again, it'd be nice to see the American Hockey League go to that and see how they feel it kind of works out and whatever. Look at, I think parity is there. I think that you would get that separation, and but again, look at, I think we have the best playoffs there are in professional sports, because we do have the ability to have an 8 versus 1 knock somebody off, unlike the NBA, which, really that is, really never happens. And it's I think that's what makes our game so great, is if you can get a hot goaltender and a team gets on a heater at the end of the year and gets into the playoffs. But, not perfect, but it's still the greatest game in the world. And that's why we work in it. And that's why we love it so much.
No doubt about that. I've never asked you this question, so I'm very curious to hear the answer. I know you're from Chicago. I know you were born and raised down there. How did you
Yep.
come to hockey? How many sports did you play growing up, and how did you eventually figure out that hockey was your game?
Well, I mean, I was a big baseball player when I was a youngster. My dad, the real Ed Olczyk, because there are 4 Eddie Olczyks in this world,
Wow.
Kev. My dad, who's going to be 83. Me, obviously, and I'm, 50, and I'll just say I'm in the 50s, but high 50s. We'll leave it
Me
at that.
too.
My son Eddie is a 89 birth year, so he's 35, turning 36 soon. And then his son, my grandson,
Oh,
another Eddie Olczyk, is
oh,
3 years old, and my dad, the real Ed Olczyk, still thinks to this day that I would have been a better baseball player than a hockey player.
oh, come
I
on.
love playing. That's what he thinks. I love playing baseball. I unfortunately, again, I look back and say, maybe I could have played a little longer, but hockey became 13 months a year when I was 14 years old, and I had to hang up my spikes and concentrate on hockey 13 months a year. I mean, I was being recruited by the top baseball colleges in the country when I was a freshman in high school, and I didn't think about doing the Kirk Gibson thing or the Deion Sanders thing back in 1980 or 81, but I always wondered what would have happened if I got a chance to pursue baseball. But hockey, I brought home a flyer from school when I think I was 6 years old, Kev, and it was a learn escape program in a suburb of Chicago, about maybe 8 miles from O'Hare, Niles, Illinois, and I brought home a learn escape program, and I lost my mom here in the last couple of years, and I remember my mom just taking me to the rink and me hitting the deck on those blades and crying and wanting to get off, and my mom would say, no, you're going to give it a chance, and I'm glad that my mom pushed me out there, and all these years later, 52 years later, it's been a love of mine and passion of mine. So like I was, like I said, baseball. I played a lot of golf as a kid. My dad wanted me to play football, but I wasn't tough enough to play football. But hockey and baseball were my two dreams and passions. And, growing up in Chicago, obviously, I mean, I was a huge Blackhawk fan and a huge Cub fan. And, the so-called rest is history. So, yeah, baseball and hockey for years truly back in the early 70s, growing up as a wannabe professional athlete at some point down the road, and was lucky enough to be able to do that in the National Hockey League.
Well, I've watched Brock Faber go from being
Yeah.
a Minnesota, Golden Gopher and a Rube in the fan, in the stands cheering on the Minnesota Wild, and then eventually landing on that rink and being a star player. And I look at what you did in 1984 after being a top draft pick of the Blackhawks. There you are at Chicago Stadium playing in the building that you went to as a kid, watching your favorite hockey team, and now you're debuting in the National Hockey League against another Original Six team in the Detroit Red Wings. What was that experience like? My God.
Yeah, it was. It was breathtaking. I mean, when you were telling the story, I still get chills about, being drafted by my hometown team. I mean, so proud to be the first ever American-born native son to be drafted by his hometown team in the first round of an NHL draft. And as you know, Kevin, the business, there aren't a lot of firsts, and when you're the first, that's pretty good. Like you lead the long list of obviously great American-born players that have come. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that 1980 Miracle on Ice team that opened up the door, I really believe, for American-born hockey players to get to the National Hockey League. And I was lucky enough 4 years later as a 16-year-old to make Team USA, and then 17 play in the Olympics in 1984 in Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, and then get drafted by my hometown team. But that first game, I mean, I remember it. I mean, I was so nervous, and like you said, for all those years going to the old Chicago Stadium, I used to look out from the stands through the glass onto the ice and wondered what that would be like someday. I didn't know how to get to the NHL. I didn't know anything about a draft. You're a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old. You don't, you just want to play in the NHL. You think that somebody will come and find you and sign you, and then all of a sudden you're playing in the show. But yeah, it was a dream come true, and I obviously play against, an arch rival in Detroit, and to be able to score a goal in my very first game against the Red Wings as a Chicago kid, it was a dream come true, and can certainly relate to a guy like Brock Faber, and there's so many people that have helped you along the way, and look, you need a little luck too. I mean, you do. I mean, you need great coaching. You need unbelievable support from your family, the sacrifice that goes into it. I mean, I live that as a father with my boys who all played competitive hockey, played college hockey. And then I'll tell you what, Kev, I can't wait for my grandson when he starts playing, and, to be able to go on the road again and go to those hockey tournaments and travel. And, those are, I always tell young parents that, like, look at this, enjoy enjoy the great times, but enjoy the stressful times and the trying times, because it goes way too fast. Like I look back all the time, and it's hard not to get emotional. But I tell people, like, look, I would not trade anything in for how I treated my kids. Now, if you ask my kids, they probably thought there was too much discipline in the Olczyk household. But my wife and I always thought that, hey, you know what? If you don't get it here, in the world we're living in now, you're not going to get it anywhere. So you better get it here, and you better learn here that there are rules, and this is the way we're going to do things, and this is the way we're going to communicate, and there aren't going to be phones at the dinner table. And when we tell you to be home at 11, you're not home at 11:15 unless you call us. Just little things like that, right? But so, as I like to tell all young parents, is like, look, it goes so fast, but just enjoy the time. And look, I wouldn't change anything that I had the time with my kids. And if you'd ask them, they probably thought there was too much discipline in our house. But at the end of the day, that's the way we chose to rear our kids, and to, communication and what have you. But at the end of the day, is that, I wouldn't change anything. The only thing I wish I could have back would be the time, Kev, because those school rides, picking them up from school, having lunch with them at school, the hockey trips, the baseball tournaments, going to games, that's what I miss most. But now I get to do it with my grandson and my granddaughters, hopefully down the line, whatever they choose to do. And I'm just very lucky. But getting back to Chicago, look, I was lucky enough to play my first game as a Blackhawk, my 1,000th game as a Blackhawk, and my last game as a Blackhawk, and a lot of games in between in Toronto and Pittsburgh and Winnipeg and New York and LA, and just very thankful to have been able to play in my hometown and play the greatest game in the world, and a place that I grew up and always dreamed about playing. And I fulfilled a dream, and it was everything and much more than I thought.
I grew up on North Stars Blackhawks. For me, that was everything. When those two teams got together, like, I knew the rosters up and down. So I look
Yeah,
at the roster that you entered in your rookie year in '84 with
yeah.
Murray Bannerman, Doug Wilson, Al Secord, Denny Savard, Steve Larmer. Of the veterans, was there a guy in that locker room that kind of helped you get over the nerves and figure out the routine? Because you scored 20 goals your rookie year, and that's really difficult to do, especially on a team that's already got all that established talent. So who kind of took you under their wing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, it was Troy Murray, who had only been in the league probably a couple of years. Troy had come from North Dakota, I think, the year plus before, and we ended up playing on a line together. But I mean, when I looked around that room, you're right. I mean, I had, Daryl Sutter, who was my first roommate, was my captain. You had Kurt Frazier, who was on my line with Troy Murray for a long period and a long stretch. Dennis Savard, Steve Larmer,
Oh,
Tommy Lysiak. I mean, we had unbelievable guys to be able to learn from, and Bob Murray. I mean, just like I said, we had an unbelievable veteran-laden team, and to be a 18-year-old and having watched these guys out there, and then all of a sudden I'm out there with them battling in the conference final against the Edmonton Oilers after winning a couple of double overtime games against the North Stars, at the Met Center in Bloomington. I was living a dream. I was 4 wins away from going to the Stanley Cup final my rookie year, and we ended up winning 2 games. And quick story on that semifinal that year, that we went 6 games against Edmonton, and don't quote me, but I mean, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. We lost the first 2 games in Edmonton because they had home ice. I think we lost like 10-2 and like 12-4 the first 2 games of
jeez.
that series. And then we went home, and I think we won like 7-4 and like 4-1. So we went back 2-2. And then they
Oh,
beat
man.
us I think like 9-4 and then 8-1 the last 2 games. But we go back to '84. Obviously, they had Gretz and Mess and Kevin Lowe, my former teammate with the Rangers, and Yari Curry. I mean, you could just go on and on. Grant Fuhrer in goal. So I mean, they were on the verge of going on their heater, right, and winning 4 games. But Veteran guys are so important for young players, and it's so important because I lived this in Pittsburgh when I was coaching, and we had the Flower, and we had Sidney Crosby. You can have veteran guys, Kev, but you can't get veteran guys that are on self-led agenda mindset. They got to make
Right.
sure it's that they're taking care of the young player. And we had a couple of guys on that team who were not good for Sid. And as a coach, I had to put myself in a spot where you had to draw a line in the sand and tell the veteran guy to back off, like you're not doing the kid any service. And, it's just so important to have those guys. So those guys I mentioned, Troy Murray in particular, I mentioned Savvy and Larms, and just like I said, on and on. But a guy like Troy Murray, to this day, I mean, we were in each other's weddings, and unfortunately, Troy is in a battle himself with cancer, and I had my battle a couple of years ago, and he really, he was the ultimate teammate and a tremendous player. He played his college hockey at North Dakota, and I think he captained Team USA's, Team Canada's World Junior at one point back in the early '80s as well. So he was a Selke winner too, Kev. Back in I think '85, '86, I believe that season. I think he had 99. We were the almost line that year. Troy had 99 points. I had 79 points, and Kurt Frazier had 69 points. So. But yeah, like Troy Murray was, I mean, he's the best, and I love him, and I'm thinking about him and praying for him every day. But those guys helped me along the way. And then as the years went on, I became that guy. I should say, I tried to be that guy with, Keith Kachuk and Shane Doan and, young guys that came into the National Hockey League and try to help them as well. So, but yeah, those veteran guys were very, very instrumental in my career, not only on the ice, but off the ice as well.
And you got to see Edmonton at the front end of their 4-year run. And I've heard Wayne Gretzky talk about this a lot, the experience they had of falling short against the Islanders and seeing exactly what it took to be
Right.
at the top of the mountain. And I look at your career and I look at what happened 10 years later when I got to tell you, there are cups that come and go when you're my age, and I'm getting closer and
Yeah.
closer to 60. But the 1994 Stanley Cup, even though I'm not even a Rangers fan,
Mm-hmm.
everybody that followed the game just, I think, fell in love with your hockey team because of the
Yeah.
history and the drought and the Messier guarantee and all the
Yeah.
stuff that went into that. What was it like for you? And how much maybe did that impact have on you when you got to see the Oilers go on that run, knowing that, this is what it takes to be a team that wins a cup? It's not easy to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot there. I mean, look at when I got traded out of Winnipeg, I felt I love Winnipeg. Winnipeg was as great as a place that I played, outside my hometown. There wasn't a National Hockey League. I loved it. I spent 2 terms of duty there, almost 5.5 years I played in the Peg. So,
Hmm.
so when I got traded there in the Christmas of '93, my mother-in-law had taken ill. So it was really a kind of a difficult time for us family-wise off the ice. And then I got traded right after Christmas to get to New York, and look, it ended up being obviously an unbelievable place the following year. But I was pretty much a regular player there in the NHL, Kev, for the last 9 years, and then I got to New York, and then I just became a role player. Mike Keenan was our coach, well documented, and Mike had his mind made up about me even before I put the skates on for training camp in our '93, and I'm sorry, I got traded in Christmas of '92. I'm sorry. And then '93, '94 season obviously was my first full year. And that was, Keenan's first year. And that was eventually the year we ended up winning the Stanley Cup. But, he had his mind made up on me at training camp. And I'll just tell you a quick little story. So, we went through training camp right before the season started. We were out at Rye Playland, which where our practice rink was. And if anybody ever seen the movie Big, that's where Tom Hanks filmed the movie, is at
Yes.
Playland out there in Rye, New York. And
Huh.
we had a rink, we had a practice rink there. We had a great setup. And so we have a meeting right before the season's going to start. And Mike shows a video of all the teams that had won championships in New York. He shows a parade. Last time the Rangers won, the Yankees winning. Joe Namath, the whole, just it was great video, music playing in the background, getting us all fired up for the season. And then the video stops, the music stops, and again, haven't played a game yet. Had some exhibition, but no regular season. So Mike, goes around the room and says, Mark Messier, you're going to be the first Ranger to touch the Stanley Cup in 54 years when we win the Stanley Cup. Adam Graves, you're going to score 50 goals and you're going to play with Mark Messier and you're going to fight. You're going to score. Brian Leetch, you're going to win a Norris Trophy. You're going to, be the best defenseman. Mike Richter, you're going to stop every puck. Joey Kosher, you're going to beat the shit out of anybody that touches anybody on this team. And then he's looking around the room, Kev. Now, again, we're all sitting in this big square in our locker room. He looks at me and he goes, and Eddie Olczyk, pause. You might not play a game all year long, but you're going to have a role on this team. And I went, well, I guess my role's over. I guess my career is over. I guess I'm going to be here to lead the guys in the stretch and make guys laugh. So when that happened, I was just kind of like, well, I guess I'm going to have to wait for my opportunity. He's already got his mind made up. Now, let me just paint the picture. And I'll get a sling for my arm after I get done patting myself on the back here. Here's the facts. Here's the facts. From 1987 to 1992, there were only 7 players in the National Hockey League that had scored 30-plus goals for 5 straight seasons in the National Hockey League. Again, 92. So 87 to 92. Some of those names on the list: Robitaille, Yzerman, LaFontaine, Gretzky, Hull, Gartner.
These
good
are all
company.
Hall of Famers.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the other name on that list, and I'm missing one, but you get the gist, is Eddie Olczyk. So I had been a pretty productive player in the National Hockey League. But before I get into the team, I will say this, is that once I got to New York, my career came to a screeching halt. So I became a role player. I became a leader off the ice. I became a glue guy. And on a team, obviously, that made a lot of changes. We had some unbelievable players. It all ended up working out in the end, which I think made it worth the heartache of not playing and wanting to play and knowing that for whatever reason, I was the odd man out. But at the end of the day, the one thing I learned was that year is that it is so hard to win. The expectations for us, we were the best team in the National Hockey League. You go back to the first 15, 14 games that year, Kev, we were 500. We lost and tied to San Jose and Anaheim in back-to-back home games. And they were expansion teams, I believe, right in that time, or at least Anaheim was. I don't think San Jose. I think San Jose obviously came in maybe in that time frame. You would know better than me. But at the end of the day, they were, they hadn't been around a long time. So, like, all of a sudden, we were the best team in the league, and we were expected to win. And all of a sudden, we're 500, and we can't beat either one of those teams. And then we had a we had a come to McMessier meeting, and then we went on a roll where I think we won like 18 or 20, and then we won like 15 or 17, and we were the best team. We knew we were the best team, and eventually, with some adversity and some, winning in spite of our head coach, we ended up winning the Stanley Cup for the first time in 7 games against Vancouver, and bringing the Stanley Cup back to New York 54 years. And the one thing I will say, Kev, on anytime I go to New York or run into Ranger fans on the road, like, there is not, again, look at my role. I played 1 game in the playoffs that year, was the Messier we will win game in Game 6 in the conference final against the Devils. That was the only game I played after being out for, had not played in almost 2.5 months. Is still to this day, Ranger fans always give a thank you and say that that our team made their childhood or made their life by winning a Stanley Cup, because a lot of people never thought that they would see it. And even though my role was very, very small, being a part of that team and having my name on the cup and getting a ring and what have you, it just makes you feel good all these years later. It's hard to believe 30 years have passed
Right.
since we won the Stanley Cup. So I know there's a lot there, but you just don't realize how hard it is to win until you actually attain it. And you need some luck. You need obviously great players. You need great leadership, but you need role players. And we were lucky to accomplish that. And there's no doubt in my mind. Somebody asked me, you'll like this, Kev. Somebody asked me last year. The Rangers obviously last year they had 190 points last year in the regular season. They were the best team ever, and they get to the playoffs, and they're playing Florida. And somebody had asked me, like, what do you think of the Rangers? Like, how do you think? How do you think your team would do against the Ranger team this year? And, in the world we live in, of course, because everything is PC and whatever, I took a deep breath and I said, you know what? I think this Ranger team would be competitive against us. That's all I said. So I said, I'll leave it at that. That's it. And pushing it fast forward, I think we would have won that series in 4 games if we ever would have played. That's just let's go out on a limb now and just say,
I don't disagree.
yeah.
I don't disagree. And it's funny because I didn't know the whole story, and I didn't even know. I just watched there was a 30 for 30 about a week ago on ESPN that went through the whole thing with the Messier deal, and it was captivating for any hockey fan. It really was. And I knew you were on the ice for that game because I saw you in a lot of the clips of that game, so I knew you played. I didn't know the entire story with Keenan, and that sucks. But Wayne Gretzky made a comment years ago about earning the respect of your teammates and how that's done. And I think, it's interesting having played and coached at a different level than you, but I think team hockey is always going to be team hockey. And if you're that guy, you can take it 2 different ways. You can try to bring the team down or try to build the team up. And clearly, if you're going to win a cup and you're going to be a guy that, well, the credentials you brought to the table, handle it the right way, I think that carried a lot more weight than you'll probably ever know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I was recognized by, and I'm very proud of this. I mean, it's probably the greatest individual award that I have received in my life. And no disrespect to to the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, but on that team, I was voted the player's player by my teammates. And again, I played 38 games in the regular season. I played 1 game in the playoffs, and my teammates voted me as the player with the Messiers and the Graves, the Leaches, the Bukabooms, the Kovalevs, the Zubovs, the Richters, the Hartmans, the Hudsons, so for me to know that I had my peers look at me and know that I was an important part of our team, even though I only played 1 game in the playoffs, made it gave me a different appreciation, but it also helped me through one of my most difficult times in my life, both professionally and personally, because it tests your will. I mean, like you're sitting there wanting to play, and there is that fine line between becoming a distraction and being, not being selfish, but you feel like you can help and you just want that opportunity. But considering it was already set in stone that, I was going to get called upon only in dire straits, and I handled it the best way that I knew how, and I got the respect of my teammates to be able to do that. So, putting a bow on that, like that, getting that award was like, I handled it the right way. And would I love to play? 100%. Would I love to have been in Game 7 in both those series? 100%. But it all worked out in the end, and it is about team, like you said, Kev. And I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my family. I learned a lot about my friends. I learned a lot about what it's like to be a true teammate, and it was an unbelievable experience, and just so proud. And like I said, it's hard to believe it's been 30 years. 5 years ago, the Rangers had us all back, and it was unbelievable. I mean, obviously, the only member of our team that wasn't there was Alexander Karpatsev, who was a part of that unfortunate plane crash over in Russia a bunch of years ago. And, we lost Potsy, but all of our trainers were there, and, the coaches and our staff. And Since then we lost our head equipment manager, Mike Folga, who went back to his alma mater at Mercyhurst, believe it or not, after spending time with the
Wow.
Rangers in the NHL and in baseball. He went back to Mercyhurst, and that's where he ended up passing away from cancer. And but to get back, and the Rangers did it was unbelievable celebration, like Sam Rosen, our colleague, and, one of the best to ever do it at 40 years. He's retiring. This is his last year with the Rangers. And obviously Minnesota's very own Joe Micheletti. They've done an unbelievable job in the tag team and the TV booth with the Rangers. We wish Sam well. Sam was one of the hosts, and JD came back from, I think he was in St. Louis at the time, I believe, or in Columbus, I think he was at the time. He came back and co-hosted, because those guys were broadcasting our games, back in the day. So, just so many great memories in New York. And, like I said, it was a learning experience, but hard to believe it's going back 30 years. And it's always great to see the old guys. The stories are the same, but it just takes us a little bit longer to tell the stories, because we are getting up there in age.
So you had Messier as a captain there. We know who Sidney Crosby is now, face of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and we mentioned Wayne Gretzky earlier. Is there something with your experiences? You've been around these guys throughout all their careers. Is there something that ties them together when you look at guys like Gretzky, Sidney Crosby, and a guy like Mark Messier?
Yeah, I would put Mario Lemieux obviously in that. I play with Mario. I coached his team. I'll leave it at that. Like, he was a player, and he came out of retirement, obviously, when Sid came into the National Hockey League, and being around him on that scale, playing with Mess, playing against Gress, and then obviously with Sid and coming in. I guess personally, like, those guys, the best way to describe it, Kev, is those guys just breathe different air. I don't know. I don't know what other way to say it. Like, they're one step ahead of everybody, not only because of their greatness of their skill, but their mind, like their understanding of the game. And just, that's the only way I could say it. Never being on a team with Gretz, I just know guys that obviously played, with him, and, now obviously working on this, being on the same team with him at TNT. But, being around Mario and obviously being around Sid for a short period of time, they just have that ability to drag everybody with them and just make everybody better. Like, you could look at guys that all those guys had played with, that, you look at guys and just go, wow. All of a sudden this 20-goal scorer becomes a 40-goal scorer, or, this guy becomes a top line guy, or, and I think they have it. And I think the one thing I will say is, I think that they do have an appreciation, obviously playing with Mess too and playing against them, is that they do have a true appreciation for every guy on the roster, from themselves being at the top of the totem pole, or somebody like me at the bottom. Like, I think that those guys really understand team, right? You can't spell team without M, right? So I think at the end of the day is that they just have a true appreciation for every type of player. I always tell people all the time, I say it on TV, I said it when I was coaching, is like, everybody has a role. You got to do two things. You got to have the willingness to accept it, and you got to have the willingness to execute it. And then one day in a meeting in Pittsburgh, I said, I call them the two A's. You got to be able to accept and execute. And then somebody goes, you spell execute with an E, right? I said, yeah, I know. I just wanted to make sure you were listening, So I got their attention that way. So, yeah.
All right, final quick thing here, and we'll let you go. I know it's a game day. You got to call the game tonight in Denver with the Avalanche and the Bruins. We'll call this the Hat Trick Hot Seat. 3 quick questions, just your top of the head from the heart of Enzo. No,
is this going to end up on? Is this going to end up on Space Face or Talk Tick or whatever you call these things?
No.
Are we gonna? No. Okay.
This is just from the hip. Whether you're a player or a broadcaster, if you have an off night in an NHL city, what is your very favorite NHL city to have that off night?
Oh, jeez. Well, I mean, I gotta say, I mean, at one point it was probably New York because I would head over to the Meadowlands and probably catch the late daily double at Santa Anita, and then take the Meadowlands in at night. I mean, you remember the day when remember Garden State Park? Remember Garden
Yes.
State out at
Oh,
Cherry
yes,
Hill?
I do.
You go to Philly, and you go in. I'd go across the river and I'd go to Garden State and watch the races over there. So, but I mean, since then, obviously, I mean, things have changed just a tad with schedule and travel. But I've always been a Vegas guy. I'll always be a Vegas guy. I'd have to say a night at the Red Rock Resort Hotel would be T-Bones would probably be my night off in Vegas.
Beautiful. All right. So we've got a lot of listeners that travel into Chicago. You're a
Yeah,
Chicago guy. Give us one restaurant. If you're going to recommend folks coming down to Chicago to take in a Hawks wild game or going down there
yeah,
just to see the great city that
yeah,
is,
yeah.
where's your favorite spot for a restaurant?
Oh man, unfortunately, before COVID and all the businesses and everything started shutting down, all that stuff, I would have told them Lowry's in a heartbeat. Get the end cut well done, get some cream corn, get some mashed potatoes, and ask for the specialty Eddie Olczyk banana cream pie. And then you might as well just
Oh,
say, thanks for coming. But I will say this, that I'll fast forward for our younger viewers, because probably people are wondering, Lowry's, what the hell is that? I would say you have to go to Chicago Cut right on the river. That's what I would say. Chicago Cut.
ooh,
Ask for my buddy David Flom. Tell him you're a friend of Enzo's, and he'll take care of you. But that would probably be. I mean, I guess if you could get there in the next 10 days, it'd be okay to sit out on the river, and
yes.
you better bring a neck brace while you're at it, just in case. But at the end of the day, I would say Chicago Cut at any time of year will do you good.
Final question. You have a day off. You're not working. You have one day at any racetrack. Which track are you going to head to just for a day at the races? Because guys like us end up spending most of our days at the track on the clock. So when you're off the
Yeah,
clock and you can just actually settle in and have a
yeah,
day at the track, what track do you want to be at?
yeah. Wow. Well, I guess if you're telling me it's my final day and this is it, that the party is over, I'm gonna have to say, because I've fallen in love with Santa Anita out in
Mm-hmm.
Arcadia, California, the home of Jason Robertson, by the way, of the Dallas Stars, by the way.
Yes.
Um, I would have to say Santa Anita. I would say if they're telling me this is it, those San Gabriel Mountains, and I fell in love with Santa Anita the first time I went there, and always seemed to have some success. And look, if you're telling me I could go back to Hollywood Park, I might tell you get rid of SoFi for about 10 hours, and I can go back to Hollywood Park and hit that pick six I hit about 12 years,
Oh
15
man,
years ago. Then
legendary.
yeah, well, I would say I could go back to Hollywood Park, but I become a California guy, even though I'm a Midwest guy. Very close second would be obviously the spa out there at Saratoga, but only one, I'd say Santa Anita for the day.
And I took the wild traveling party out to Santa Anita about 7 or 8 years ago. Tom Reed, the Silver Fox,
Yeah,
who you know
yeah,
well, we had about 8 of us, and they were just taken
blown
back by the
away,
beauty.
blown away.
The
Yeah,
mountains, I mean, the setting. We were in the
yeah,
Logan Lounge. I know you've hung out
yeah.
there.
Oh, yeah,
Just
yeah, yeah, yeah,
spectacular, right? I mean,
yeah,
just a perfect Sunday at the track. If I could go back in time, I'd go right back to Chicago. Arlington Park. They ripped, you
yeah,
know what? My heart's been ripped out of my chest twice in my lifetime. Once when the North Stars left Minnesota, and once
yeah,
when Arlington Park died, in which it is now.
yeah,
That place,
yeah,
Ed. So I've been all over the world. You will
yeah,
never find a more beautiful sports facility than Arlington
yeah.
Park in its heyday, and it's just tragic that it's no longer there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's going to be the future home of the Bears or not, or their practice facility or whatever. But I mean, look, I grew up there. I had my friend. That's the first time I went to the racetrack. Real quick racetrack story, if I can, Kev. So I'm
Sure.
12, 13 years old. My old team manager for one of my teams and his son Danny Quillis, Mr. Quillis, the late Tony Quillis, was our team manager, and he's a broken down horse player, and we were in between spring league games, and he was like, "Come on, we're gonna go to the racetrack or whatever," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, or whatever." So I think I had borrowed maybe like $20 from my mom's purse, and I'll just leave it at that. But I did tell my mom before she passed. I said, "Mom, I just got to let you know." And she says, "I know you did." So at least my mom knew I borrowed $20 from her when she didn't know I took it and whatever. So I had to get that off my chest that I borrowed $20 from my mom's purse. But anyways, I went to the racetrack for the first time with my buddy Danny and his late father. And, I was like, man, look at these majestic animals, 1,200 pounds. You got these crazy humans on the back of them going 35 miles an hour. You talk about Arlington, how beautiful it was. And again, I'm going back, this is 78-ish, so you're probably talking about early fires, Pat Day,
Oh my God.
Yeah, Juvenal Diaz, Carlos Sayo Silva, so I'm at the track and I go up there and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just looking at names and, numbers or whatever. So I go up there, playing. He explains to me, what to play or whatever. So I'm trying to hit a couple of exactas, right? Trying to get the exact order of the top two finishers. First two races I go up there and bet $3, whatever, I'm spending $4 or $5, nothing. So I'm down to my last $10 or whatever. I go up there and I play a 1-6. That's the number I wore. I was born on the 16th. Bobby Clark was my favorite player growing up. I didn't play anything like Bobby Clark. I just loved his number. And I was a closet Flyer fan because I grew up in Chicago and whatever. So I go up there. I said, yeah, give me a $5 exacta box 1-6 or whatever. And the odds on the one, I remember it to this day. The odds on the one were 11-1, and on the 6-1, the horse was 3-1. So I go up there, I buy a $5, I bet a $5 exacta box, and long story short, all of a sudden it comes in 1-6. So I was going to the same the ticket taker, right? So I go up there and I give him my ticket. And again, I'm 12 turning 13, and I was a pretty big kid, but I don't know if I looked old, but older. So the guy looks at me, cashes, and the the thing comes out. It says $238.
Oh my God!
And the guy looks at me, and he goes, "Hey kid, how old are you?" And I lean in. I swear, I lean in. I got my Jimmy Connor nut hugger shorts on. I got a golf shirt on. I got my high top gym shoes on. I'm gonna get $238. I got some wood. I'm just telling you, I'm excited now. I got $238. I lean into the guy after he says, "Hey, how old are you?" I go, "You didn't ask me how old I was when I lost." So then the guy looks at me. He hands me $238. I pass to him 3 singles. And as a 12 or 13-year-old Eddie Olczyk, I winked at him and I took my $235 and I wore out a path to the window the rest of my life. So that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Oh, when you're that age, honest to God, when you're that age and you hit for a couple hundred, you literally feel like you own the world. Like
right?
That is
right.
Oh, there's nothing better.
Wasn't it the greatest? I mean, the guy. The guy had the nerve. Look at. Now I've learned over the years because I've probably gone to about, honestly, probably 10,000 different betting windows in my lifetime, which is okay. I'm fine with it. Yeah, I'm fine.
Sure.
But when I was like, well, geez, if you go to it, it's got to be the ticket taker's fault because I can't go to that same window now when I lose. So I've learned that over the years. But the third time was the charm. I swear, the guy probably. I mean, I don't even. The guy probably was in his late 40s, early 50s, and here I am, 12 or 13 years old, and I get $238, and the guy gets a little, he wanted to see how I reacted, right? It was like, oh my gosh,
sure.
What am I going to do? So I just looked at him and I just, I told him what I said and I gave him $3 and I walked away after I winked at him. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be coming back to this place probably the rest of my life. And as you know, I've continued to do it. I have continued to. Now it's much different now because of the computer and everything else. But There's nothing like a day at the track, that's for sure.
No, and having those tickets, I'll play on the computer like everybody else, but having those tickets in your hand, Enzo, especially when you hit something really good, there's not a better feeling in the world. And I can't wait.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to going to Del Mar to have a few of those tickets for the Breeders' Cup when I'm working for NBC, and I'll have a few of those. The late, a real quick story again, I got to say, because Bob Newmeyer, one of the great broadcasters ever. Bob Newmeyer did everything in Boston and nationally from I got a chance to really get to know him. I knew him through hockey because remember, he used to call the Whalers on, I think, TV one year, and then he did radio, and then he went to the Bruins and did radio, and then he did NBC. He was one of our hosts, and that's how I really got a chance to know Numi. And, he has since passed, but I got a chance to work with Numi during my early days at NBC doing horse racing. And Numi, we had a great relationship. I loved our shtick, and we had such a great time and great chemistry. And I just had missed out on. Honestly, it was. I think if you can remember, I want to go back and say it's got to be at least the. Oh boy, I'm going to say probably like the 04 or 5 Acorn. Where By the Moon, I picked By the Moon in the Acorn on Belmont Day. I looked up, the horse was 33-1 on the board. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to have to put my plums on the table because I really like this horse. And you know what? I don't care. I just think the horse has a chance, right? So I played everything. And just listen to me for a second. And I'm maybe going too inside. I'm just letting people know By the Moon, it was a very nice filly. And the next race was Tepin, the turf horse Tepin for Mark Casse.
She was a monster.
I played a $2,000 daily double By the Moon onto Tepin. The double was paying $550. Tepin was 7-2. By the Moon was 33-1. I picked By the Moon on top.
It's paying $550 for every $2, right? That's what people need to understand.
$554 for a $2 wager. So do the math.
Oh, God.
I had By the Moon. She took the lead at the 8th pole. Jose Ortiz decides to go to the rail. Go back and watch this race, and you sit there and go, the rail was dead that day at Belmont. If she stays in the 3-path, she wins, and then Tepin wins off, and I cash for a half a schmil for $2,000. So anyway, she ends up getting beat a whisker, more than a whisker, a long whisker.
She was the best horse in the race. She just didn't. She was the best,
and the horse that beat her got left at the gate by Todd Pletcher and ends up winning the race. But anyways, go back and watch it and text me. You're going to sit there and go, Enzo, I can't believe you lost this race. All he had to do was to stay in the 3-path. Anyways, I lose. Then Tepin wins. So Bob Newmeyer gets on the air. Bob Newmeyer gets on the air and goes, I got to say, I got to tell you, I love this guy. I not only love him because I'm hockey, but this guy fires. That race before cost him. He's got like $2,500 worth of losing tickets, and he drops the word satchel on the broadcast. I go, what are you talking about, satchel? He goes, folks, this guy had $2,500 of losing tickets in satchel. That's why I love this guy. If his horse would have won, he would have needed a Brinks truck to get out of here. So that was
factual.
Numi. That is factual. But anyways, Numi was a great friend. I stay in contact with his wife, Michelle, all the time. Just a beauty. And I miss him. I think about him often when I go to the racetrack because he loved sports. He loved the Bruins. He loved everything about Boston, the Red Sox, and the Pats. But he
had that twinkle
aren't
in
many
his
guys
eye,
that
Enzo,
loved horse
right?
racing.
Like
he never. Oh yeah, for sure.
He just had that it factor. Like when you watched him broadcast, he would have done it for free. Like he loved
he was
just
awesome.
being there.
He was awesome.
And
he was
exuded that personality into every broadcast. And I love watching the Breeders' Cup. It'll never be.
He made me better. He made me a better broadcaster. He really did. Like we were only together for 5 years, maybe, and then NBC decided to cut ties for whatever reason, and I mean, obviously, I know that hurt a lot of us. And look, the world is what it is, and business and whatever. But I think that really, I know that hurt him and devastated him, and like he just unfortunately ended up passing a couple of years later. But I miss him. But he was a great broadcaster, and he loved horses like we do, Kev. So I figured I would want to end on a great Numi note, and looking forward to getting to the Breeders' Cup and getting a couple of those tickets. And every once in a while, I honor him with this one. Our old friend Bob Newmeyer would love this wager, so I'm going to make this one in honor of Numi and keep his name and his spirit alive because he he loved the game, and he was a great teammate to be around, not only in hockey but in horse racing as well.
Great way to end the show. We're 2 weeks away from that Breeders' Cup. Can't wait to see what type of opinions you come up with. It's game day for you. You've got to get to work. Thank you, Eddie. Honestly, thank you so much for not only doing this, but then for just being the guy you are. You are above and beyond the absolute best. So thanks for being a part of the show.
Anytime, pal. Love you, and keep up the great work. Always just enjoy watching you during baseball season, and then obviously during hockey season when I can, and look forward to our paths crossing sooner than later. Make sure you say hi to my guys there, Billy Guerin and the Flower, and then Hartsey there, Ryan Hartman, another Chicago guy, and always hoping for the best for people that are great like yourself. So thanks for having me, and I look at, as I always love to say with my former great partner, the Hall of Famer Pat Foley in Chicago, they don't make sticks like they used to, because we all know is wood is good. So nice to be on wood and sticks with you.
I can't say any better than that, folks. We're going to close the show after this quick break, and that was fun. Oh, my gosh. Awesome stuff. Okay, that was a longer conversation than I planned, because I was trying to be respectful of his game day, and thankfully he is the reason we went long, and that makes me feel really good, because I think he was having a decent time, and that's what this show is all about. So just in awe of his journey, to be honest. A kid that grew up in Chicago, that got drafted 3rd overall, ends up making his debut in the historic good old building that is Chicago Stadium, scores a goal in his first game, and goes on to be a U.S. Hockey Hall of Famer, along with a Stanley Cup winner and so many other great things, and not to be forgotten for, of course, beating cancer. And you can enjoy his broadcasts on TNT. This show will actually air after their game in Denver, but he's on all the time. Also covers the Seattle Kraken. And then, of course, tune in a couple of weeks, as all of us who love the game of horse racing will be watching the Breeders' Cup. That's Friday, November 1st, and Saturday, November 2nd. I'll be taking part of that in at Canterbury Park out in Shakopee. I'm a part of a Breeders' Cup seminar on Halloween night with Paul Allen. It should be a great weekend, and Enzo will be a large part of that coverage. And I'm telling you right now, this guy, Eddie Olczyk, as good a hockey player as he was, he's even better with the ponies. So when you start hearing him tout horses, make sure you follow in and cash some bets alongside the great Enzo, because that weekend he is going to be sending it in, and he's going to put a bunch of time in finding winners. And if you want to get involved in horse racing, he'd be a pretty good guy to follow Breeders' Cup weekend here in a couple of weeks when they gather out in California at Del Mar. We'll gather again next week. We'll look forward to more great content. We've been treated to some real exciting hockey in the first couple of weeks, and the Minnesota Wild are off to a great start. So we'll have some Wild content for you next week. I can't wait to catch up with the Gus Bus and talk about the first goalie goal in the history of the Minnesota Wild. There are just 15 guys that have done that. That's less, as far as numbers go, than perfect games in baseball. So think about what we witnessed a few days ago in St. Louis, and we are leaving on a 12-day trip. So I'll be recording these next 2 shows out on the road. So there'll be some good fun that we'll have as the Wild hope to continue that decent start to their campaign. Thanks for listening, Wood and Sticks, and most of all, thank you to Eddie Olczyk for being such a fantastic guest today. Talk to you next week.